Hello, I am Sena and welcome to a series I like to call Europe in the 19th Century, a series detailing all about Europe, where it changes its geography, politics, economy, and culture. In this past episode, we will discuss the Napoleonic Wars and how they set the stage for Europe's geopolitics moving on up until the 20th century. France, for all its existence, was home to great leaders like Joan of Arc or Charles de Gaulle. But there are some other leaders who poorly managed the country. Some like the mad Charles of France, or even today, Louis the XVI. Louis the XVI was the Bourbon king, and he poorly managed France and with lots of taxes to peasants and leveraging his friends with parties and great banquets. So one day, the peasants of France and almost all the population revolted and created some secret society to talk about reforms they could give to that king. One revolution after that, a mad guy named Robespierre created the Great Terror to kill even more people who he thought were doing wrong, until he himself was killed because he tried to expose his own underlings for betraying him. Meanwhile, in 1785, a young Napoleon Bonaparte had just graduated from the military academy and had dreams of grandeur and leading a grand army. Problem is, they only did back then allow people in the form not of their military experience, but of the prestige they owned. But Robespierre's revolution had promised to tear down the old fancy legacy system, so Napoleon was in on it to defend the revolution. He started by stopping a British-sponsored invasion of Toulon and then stopping a protest in Paris. After all these, he got promoted over time and even got his own little army. However, after France's revolution, the rest of Europe were not so content with France's new system of ruling, since most of them were still monarchies. So they enacted a coalition and declared war on France, and the War of the First Coalition began. At first, France was pummeled by the Holy Roman Empire and Prussia, but then they started to surprisingly do very well, and in conquered territories established sister republics to export their revolutionary ideology. In 1796, they planned a full frontal assault on Vienna, with Napoleon's first ever military campaign into Italy as a diversion of some sorts. Napoleon's military prowess was shown firsthand, galvanizing his troops with rousing speeches, paying them even the first real money they'd seen in years. They were so inspired by his speeches and the fact that he would get in front of the battle and get covered in mud that they would suicidally charge into a bridge Napoleon ordered taken. He knocked out Sardinia out of the war and went on to go to Vienna, while most of France was bogged down in other wars with the Holy Roman Empire and Prussia. The Austrians were so scared, they sued for peace with Napoleon, himself negotiating the treaty. Just like that, a 28-year-old Napoleon had just knocked Austria out of the war. Napoleon then returned to France, crowned as an extremely popular person amongst the common folk. He used his popularity and the support of other officials to stage a coup on the very unpopular government. But suddenly, after staging this coup, Europe struck back, and this time a Russian empire led by Alexander I was joining the fight. Napoleon then started moving his army, and to surprise the Austrians, he moved through the Alps. It was here in the Alps where Napoleon's infamous portrait of him riding a horse with the Alps in the background was painted. Napoleon would attack the Austrians besieging Genoa and struck them back, and yet again the Austrians sued for peace. For the first time in many years after this conflict, Europe was at peace. After the war, Napoleon started introducing many policies that changed France. He introduced a centralized legal code he called the Napoleon system, improved educational access and road infrastructure, brought back the Catholic Church, which dissolved the Inquisition, and allowed Jewish people to settle in a time of anti-Semitism. His greatest act as a leader of France was his crowning as emperor in a grand ceremony. However, However, peace again didn't last long, as the coalition was back for a third time, and again the European powers were beaten by Napoleon. Here, one of his most skillful tactics was speed, as he had reorganized his army into corps, which were basically mini armies. All of those corps lived off the land, and so they didn't have to deploy on heavy supply trains bogging them down. With this, he could successfully outmaneuver his enemies before they even noticed. Napoleon, however, was unable to outmaneuver the Russian, which attempted to prolong the war and stall Napoleon out. Some countries, like Prussia, even thought of joining in, so Napoleon devised a sneaky trick to lure the Russian Emperor Tsar Alexander to an icy river, where they were soon trapped and besieged, ambushed by the French. Some of them died in the icy river and drowned. However, Frederick, King of Prussia, was pressured to militarize and joined Russia, Austria, and Britain in the fight against Napoleon in the Fourth Coalition. Ooh. Napoleon entered Prussia to fight Frederick, but he moved east and Napoleon followed. But worse yet, winter had come, and no way Napoleon was ever gonna face winter again and lose harshly. In harsh winter conditions, Napoleon experienced some of his first losses and was nearly captured. But in the end, he was saved by his great cavalry commander, Murat, and fled to France. Napoleon's grip on Europe was loosening. A campaign plan in Spain to overthrow the king was bogged down to guerrilla warfare. However, even now, he managed to beat the coalition for a fifth time this row. Though his military skills now were rusty, he was still undoubtedly the master of Europe. Russia, meanwhile, was suffering from Napoleon's blockade of the UK and a loss of territory to sister republics, so decided not to follow Napoleon's system. In return, Napoleon invaded Russia. However, as Napoleon advanced, the Russians used a tactic that would decimate his troops: scorched earth! As Napoleon's troops advanced, the Russians burned whatever land they could find, meaning Napoleon's troops couldn't live off the land, and they had to use heavy supply carts. As he attempted to catch up to the retreating Russians, his men died of the elements, and some even deserted. When he got close to Moscow, he knew they wouldn't give up such a holy and protected city, and he was right. The Battle of Borodino endured was Napoleon's bloodiest conflict, with 70,000 Russian and French deaths. Yet he still won. But the Russians' usage of scorched earth wasn't done yet, as they burned down Moscow. Napoleon had just captured Russia's most treasured city, but soon winter arrived and Napoleon knew he needed to get the heck out of Russia fast before the winter got bad. But then, worst of all, the winter actually got really bad. That his men and horses froze to death, and when they tried to get across the Borodino River, the bridge burned before everyone could get across. In short, 600,000 men entered, less than 100,000 returned. But wait, that's not the end of Napoleon yet. Tune in next time, where I will explain the fall of Napoleon and his final duels of Waterloo. Thank you all for watching this video. As you know, a part 2 will be coming out soon. And I hope you like and subscribe and watch this video. Thank you very much. Sena reporting out.